Hello, this is Phil with Morris Writers, and today I'm going to talk about the anatomy of an absurdity. And this is how a joke is evolving into a market-ready fantasy novel. All right, so let me give you a little bit of a background here. The spark of this. All right, I was in a meeting, basically, and someone in the meeting had wanted me to draw a picture of a griffin. And since it's kind of hard for me to write while I'm in meetings, it's fine time for me to draw. So the subject is a griffin. And then as part of the joke, I continued along and I turned this into a funny sort of book cover. I was just going to do it as a lark, really, and so everybody can get a laugh at it. And it was going to be an eagle with a lion's butt, an exhaustively serious study of mythical creatures that clearly went too far. And then I came up with the pen name Lionel Eagleton as a play on lion and eagle. And so, and put the seal on there, nature's weird, deal with it. So the whole idea was not to mock the creature, but to mock humans trying to classify things. And everyone was saying, so, is this the book you're going to write? And a bunch of people were saying, hey, when's it coming out? Can I get on the pre-order list? This sounds like it's going to be a fun book. So it's like, okay, I suppose we're going to make this book. So, in order to do that, I needed to do some research on the genre. The genre is obviously going to be comedic fantasy. Not necessarily going to be Earth, but it's going to be an Earth-like world and a lot of Earth-like things in it. So I needed to create a protagonist. Well, I needed to come up with a good protagonist, so I came up with Professor Percival Featherbutt. Okay, he's going to be impeccably dressed, tailored, dignity, maintains this impeccable dignity despite being on a expedition for 3 weeks through the wilderness. He's going to have the wire-rimmed glasses. He's not the sort to try to get into things, push himself into places that he doesn't belong. He's going to be obviously, long finger, small ink stains. He's not going to carry a weapon. He's not even going to be the sort to have a machete or anything like that. And he's going to be very much the one to, deal with these creatures, carrying an enormous journal, field observations. So his core identity is a scholar, explorer, a gentleman, and absolutely unaware that he is at all funny. So he's going to be lacking in that human interaction, but he's going to be great with animals. So in order to create the comedic mode here, we wanted to have a good comedic cycle, and the comedy engine is kind of a rigorous system of errors. He's going to have a perfect observation of a mythical creature. He's going to come up with some sort of flawed logic as to why the creature is doing this, or what it does, or how it does it. And it's going to go into a sincere action, which is going to have an absurd consequence, which will have yet another sincere action, which will go into a scholarly sort of documentation, and then that will be the loop for the comedy engine. Now, this isn't the only comedy engine in here. There's going to be multiples, and it's not going to be just a constant, retelling of the same sort of thing. So the case study here was, okay, what if he came across a phoenix chicken, a chicken that caught on fire, was basically immortal, reborn from its ashes, but it also laid eggs. Okay, the observations are the eggs are dangerously hot. And what he does is, he gets one, cooks one for breakfast. The breakfast catches fire. His conclusion notes that a culinary gland causes the egg to be self-warming, assumes that the plate was at fault. That's the funny part there. Okay, that's the flawed logic inside the sincere action. Now, we may not have a phoenix chicken, but that's an idea. All right. Now, another thing is, in this sort of market, you need to have the found family. And one thought was, okay, he's going to have traveling companions or a traveling companion as a potential system here. We want them all to conflict. They're not going to work together harmoniously. That's also going to add more to the comedy nature of this. So Featherbutt says, oh, the phoenix chicken is displaying courtship behavior. The rival could say, well, it's clearly territorial. The cook says, well, it's obviously hungry. And the porter is the sort of person that goes, well, he's just threw the professor's hat into the pond to keep it from burning because it caught on fire while dealing with the phoenix chicken. Okay? So having the conflict with the other people that he has to deal with is going to be another part of the comedy. Now, one thing that I don't want to have is I don't want to have just comedy for the sake of comedy. So inside this market, we have the weak execution and the strong execution. The weak things are going to be just things that are completely random. Giraffe with 6 hats sings opera because Tuesdays are blue. Okay, that could be funny. My daughter laughed at that because she thought it was funny. But, that's not going to be good narratively. Now, we don't want to have the narrator causing jokes to happen. Ha ha, what a silly bird. That's not going to be funny. And we don't want to have an episodic sort of stagnation. We don't want to have a creature of the chapter. One of the things, thinking back to some TV series I saw, it turned out to be Monster of the Week. And after a couple of weeks, that got kind of boring. We wanted to have more going out throughout the series. And so we want the same sort of thing to happen inside the novel. A creature of the chapter isn't going to hold your attention. We want there to be an internal logic to the creatures, like the invisible peacock. Never seen, but still remains completely vain about its looks. Okay, that's pretty funny. That's an internal logic mechanism there. We want the narrator lens to have a strong, like David Attenborough level of sincerity talking about the creatures. Or Steve Irwin, kind of mixing the two together. Kind of getting that fun mixed in with very sincere at the same time. And that's going to make the novel work very well as well. And then we want to have a secondary engine, the expedition being the plot. We might have some things inside the city to prove that there is going to be an expedition, and then extend beyond that to be something more. We want the encyclopedia that he's creating to become the objective here. Every creature will change the direction of the book. So, yes, we're going to slowly build up with extra creatures along the way, but it's not going to be one per chapter. We might have a slow chapter where he's dealing with creatures from a previous chapter and the way that they interact with each other. So that could be really good in keeping the book interesting, the story interesting, and not focusing in on just individual creatures. Okay, so the anatomy of the field observation. And this isn't necessarily a chapter structure, this is a structure within the chapter. So we're going to have the arrival and a sighting, a sincere objective, and an irrational environment. Okay? The initial declaration is going to be humorous. Of course. And he's going to have a confident misinterpretation. Okay? And then there's going to be an observation attempted, interaction, where he will use his core to deal with these monsters, these creatures, and things like that. And then we'll have some sort of minor disaster, sort of mechanism that produces an unexpected consequence. It's going to lead to a beautiful anatomical sketch, it's going to have an incorrect scientific conclusion on it. And then we'll also have in the external, where the TA or an assistant says, well, during this, the professor was completely unconscious, so I don't know how he came up with that. So we'll have multiple things going on there. Now, the entire book, we want to build up to a big climax. As you can see on this, the climax being the griffin. Obviously, on the cover, that's what you want to shoot for. But we're going to have to start out with smaller creatures and building our stakes. The size of the creatures become more unwieldy. They become more dangerous. We're going to have comedic danger. We're going to have real dangerous threats, like a cockatrice or something like that. We're going to have, I've put down white stag here. That could be unicorn, Pegasus, a nightmare, various creatures that are known in our world as mythical creatures. And then I want to have a big climax of like a wyvern, but it's going to be a false climax. The real climax is going to be the griffin. So the scale doesn't just increase physically, the difficulty of the observations and the environment will increase as we go along. So let's talk a little bit about the structure of the climax. Now we're going to have smaller climaxes along the way. So we might have a three chapter little arc dealing with something, and it will come to a climax. But for the book, we want to have something big where we have this false climax. The big dragon looking, and that's why there's a picture of a dragon here as opposed to a wyvern. And everyone will scream, dragon! And then Featherbutt will come in and say, well, he'll be completely correct. He'll note, well, it only has 2 legs. Wrong wing structure. It's a wyvern, obviously. Nobody believes him. They think he's being pedantic. And the signal is this wasn't what he came for. This isn't what he's looking for. The true pinnacle will be more of a quiet scene as evidence accumulates, feather tracks and silence. Featherbutt will knock at the door of the griffin, and he won't get a response, so he'll wait. The twist is he doesn't bait it or trap it. The achievement is not finding a griffin, it's the griffin allowing itself to be found. And I think that's going to hit a bigger emotional pull, a stronger cue there, and I think it'll be a much better climax for the book altogether. So let's go over designing the griffin. All right, I've got an initial sketch, a cleaned up sketch, and then the colorized sketch. The visual evolution is also very similar to the evolution of the book as we go along. We're going to have very sketchy things to start out with, and things are going to become more detailed along the way. The temperament's going to stay dignified and remarkably discerning. And we're going to throw in the few things where it's like, well, we lost a pair of pants because it ate the pants. So that will keep the humor going, and we'll keep our tension rising along the way. Now, we'll get back to some of the companions. Featherbutt is the only one that's pretty locked down right now. His name is going to be Professor Percival Featherbutt. We actually have a chicken named Professor Featherbutt. It's a white silky chicken. And then we're going to have an assistant. We're going to have the adversaries. So the assistant is going to be more of a, who is this individual? What does it need? Where the professor is like, what kind of creature is this? And his approach is going to be, we must study the impossible. But he misses the human subtext, but possesses absolute focus with the creature. The assistant, on the other hand, is going to be looking at it from perhaps we should ask the impossible. They will ask, they will understand people and will recognize trauma and realize that the creatures are actually refugees. We're going to have possibly some loss of habitat, or they're being forced to move, or something like that. And then, of course, we have to have our antagonist. And our antagonist will probably be the Board of Regents. There's going to be like a Dr. Sebastian Vane. I don't like the name, so it's not going to be that, but it's a good temporary name. The approach is, what is this creature worth? They're going to start out not believing the professor, and then once they do, they're going to be like, wow, imagine this is it. We could make millions off of this. They don't want to destroy it. They don't want to get rid of it. They want to use it and exploit it. So that's going to be kind of the layout of the various characters there. They're going to have different motivations along the way. So this whole book is going to be wonder begins where ownership ends. Everyone else approaches extraordinary creatures asking, how can this benefit me? The professor asks, may I come in? Shall we have a cup of tea? I'd like to have a discussion with you about your children. And that is where the humor comes in. It draws the reader in, but the conservation theme underlying the whole thing is what really matters here. Featherbutt's greatest flaw is underestimating human greed, but his greatest strength is his radical, non-exploitive kindness. He proves that the greatest discoveries are made not by conquering nature, but by treating it as a guest in its own home. So, that is the overview of the book that started working on. I'd like to know what you think of this in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that stuff. I will have more coming out in the upcoming weeks that will show you more behind the scenes of developing this book. I'll have some of the artwork that we're going to develop for it along the way. So you might want to keep track of what's going on. So you can check us out here. You can check us out on morriswriters.com. I'll have a link in the description for you. So until the next video, I am Phil, and thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me while we go over some of the great things that we're working on. Thank you very much.